I think it's time for me to make a video again. They sort of get dated, and so I need to make another one. And as I write my memoirs, I have realized that I played this role in my family since I was the victim of a crime when I was very young, and I didn't really get to tell anyone for years. I gradually got into the role of trying to keep everyone straight in the family. Being a victim of criminal behavior does this to you.
Is that a play on words?
And that included my mother and dad. That was some job.
That was a play on words, wasn't keeping them straight in the family, right?
And I also
this
caused
from
a
the
lot of trouble
chief
for
of the
myself.
bisexual police department here,
Yeah, well,
to keep everybody
because
straight.
I questioned institutions like marriage, which I felt my father had taken advantage of to control my mother without him being entirely honest. Didn't really let her know. Tried to keep her from finding out what he was about. I could see that in extreme cases like his, marriage could be used against you. Yes, against the woman. The woman ordinarily thinks a marriage is her protection, but if...
Boy, I tell you what, times have changed a lot, believe me.
If the husband is very devious and is hiding something, why then marriage can become something to his advantage, that the wife, he's trying to hold her to this standard, stay married, be faithful, and you're not even doing it because you're unfaithful in a way that she doesn't even perceive.
You always look at me and you say those things. You're not doing it.
I'm just glancing at you out of the corner of my eye.
Yeah, right.
So then you become, as the victim, not only of the criminal outside of the marriage, but of the parents who were violating their marriage. I had two parents who were violating the marriage, and so as the children, we were always trying to straighten our parents up and appeal to them some way to, get at their criminal, their behavior of dishonesty, violating in every way. And here they had 5 children. I mean, what kind of example was this going to be? And I was the oldest, so I'd try to counteract whatever they did by, I'd try to get my sisters rounded up all the time. When, I was away to school for years, having left home when I was 13. I didn't really return except in the summers until I was 20 years old, so it was pretty hard to round my sisters up. And would I be thinking, well, now I think they're getting out of hand. I remember coming home one time.
You're the cattleman's daughter. You know how to round things up, right? Get out there and get those cows out there. Round them up, huh?
Well, well, I felt children were more important than the cows. I remember coming home.
I hate to be the one to break
finally, when I came home,
but
was
you
there in the
can't take
winter.
your child out and sell it. They don't. People will not.
My third sister,
then.
she was gone for several days, and I said, "Where is she?" Oh, she had to stay over in, the next town where the high school was, and work on the prom or something. And I go, "What? You guys are not even keeping track of her. You have no idea what she's doing over there." And, they sent me off to school in the care of my relatives, who were absolutely determined that they were going to keep me me from doing anything
Well,
the
you know,
least bit wrong.
What you have never figured out, which I figured out a long time ago, is they sent you away to school for a reason. It's to get the hell out of here and let us live our own lives and quit bugging us.
Yeah, quit.
Yeah, good. Hey, guess who's coming back from school? Oh no, she's not back already. Oh jeez. I'm going out with the guys. I'll be back in a couple months. We're going out on a cattle ride.
Me. Well, and I'd begin to get in big fights with my sisters if I saw them do something that I absolutely thought was going to lead to something very bad, and I would be fighting with them, saying, "What?" And say, I just thought, well, your mother and dad aren't going to restrain you, so somebody needs to. So I sort of pointed myself as
That's how you became
the police around there.
the chief of police for the bisexual squad.
Well, yes,
Yes,
and in the community, I pointed myself, as he said, I was the bisexual police. I mean, it was my job, as I saw it, to detect all the men and anybody who was having affairs on the side, and taking advantage of ignorant women who didn't know that that's what they were doing. They weren't educated enough. They didn't have the powers to put this together. And so my whole life, that was one of my jobs, to educate people if I possibly could. Educate women.
I think that basically was your whole occupation.
Yeah.
It wasn't an avocation, it was an occupation. Unfortunately, it didn't pay well, folks. I mean, seriously. That the government does not, especially when you're up in Utah, they don't want to hear that kind of stuff,
Well, they certainly didn't want to hear it. In fact, when I finally started talking about
it made you an outlaw, and you thought you were the police.
Well, and of course, my sisters were pretty puzzled because I came up obsessed with who was bisexual and who wasn't, without telling them that I thought our dad.
Would you quit pointing in my direction?
So I would
all
be,
the time?
well, you better check him out. He looks to me like, your boyfriend, and this one, that, I was always talking about that, they thought. I was obsessed. Well, the reason I was obsessed, I had been since I was 5 years old, when I first began to suspect that this was what my dad was doing. And 2 molesters he had partied with them, got them very angry. There were issues between him and them that fell on me. I became the victim of some of his conflicts with other men. And so now, no wonder I seemed to be obsessed to my sisters.
That's one word I'm looking at. There's a couple other words I'm looking at too, but we're not going to bring those up.
So it took quite a long time for me to finally get around to telling them that it was, I suspected our dad, because I knew they weren't going to like it. I knew they were going to get very upset, and they did. They were like, they were willing to accept that my dad was an old drunk. He did all kinds of terrible stuff, but a bisexual. Oh, how could I ever accuse him of such a terrible, awful thing? And I say, well, for heaven's sakes, it's only human. I mean, it's not that bad. Look, there's millions of gays in America. What would... And you guys can't accept that possibly our dad, and that would be like,
question.
I just don't think so. And,
when you had your lesbian contacts, did you ever think you were being molested?
No.
See, there you go.
Oh, sometimes, I've had lesbian women in the neighborhood, take hold of my hand and, and I would just drop them. Well,
talking about getting a hold of something else beside your hand.
And, and occasionally I'd warn them against a lesbian woman. And if there was a molester in the family, like an uncle or a cousin or somebody, I would watch out for him. Watch out for him, you know.
Did you have a little badge? Is this the badge right here? This is the chief of police badge.
Well,
Don't you touch any of these things up here, because these are mine and you can't touch them.
Usually a member of the family that will kind of gravitate into this role. And this was what the kind of role I was doing. So, no, my sister and I would get in great big screaming fights over. And it was usually always because I attempted to police their behavior. Tell them that they were going to really get in trouble if they continued on doing this. And then they would accuse me of all kinds of things, in retaliation, of course, and in defense. And my attitude toward marriage, for example, which I felt was used many times. It was supposed to be respectable, and it could be used by criminals quite easily to manipulate the women. And so I shied away from marriage. I said, no, I'm not, I'm giving that. Marriage is used too many times and it was with people like us, people who are on the fringe, like the daughters of someone who had done this. Like my dad, my mother finally divorced my dad, and he goes out and marries another woman that didn't know him.
Well, don't you think?
She was a nice woman, too. I talked to her, and I told him.
Yeah, but wait a minute. I don't know. What did it take, 35 years before they got divorced?
Yes.
How much punishment can this woman take? I mean,
he punished
if he didn't
her
have
very
all that money, I'd have divorced
Well,
him.
both of them had affairs, and they want, she didn't detect what kind of affairs he was having, but he held guns on her, and she thought he was going to take her out in the desert and kill her.
You got a problem with that, don't you? I mean, geez.
Yeah, well, and she finally divorced him. Well, pretty soon he was off courting.
Finally,
he began to court.
I would say
and he
35 years.
He had a brand new Cadillac. Someone was found to marry him, and this poor woman did marry him. And,
how old was she?
Oh, about his age.
Well, how old would he be then?
Oh, what was he? He was in his early 60s.
So he marries another woman?
And I told him, I said,
wait a minute.
She doesn't know you. She doesn't know you. And what I meant is what you've been, what you are.
He drives a Cadillac, a new Cadillac.
Yeah, but his character and his qualities as a husband.
What's that got to do with marriage?
Oh, yeah. Oh, dear. Well, of course, it wasn't a month until she decided she'd made a terrible mistake.
That's right.
Naturally.
Cadillac.
She got to know him a little bit better. And that's why I told him. I said, she doesn't know you.
He told her about
You're
the Cadillac.
taking advantage of her. And he said, well, you better not say anything to her because I'm marrying her. And I said, oh, sure, of course. I'm doing the right thing. I wouldn't marry a guy like you for anything on earth.
Well, not unless you're in certain parts of the South, which is, we won't go into marrying your family.
So I guess you might say that my whole life I've been in something like law enforcement. Only, I could get into more complication, like police, they have to uphold marriage and all that. They can't criticize the institution of marriage. This is the
only gun I would ever allow her to get close to.
But I would criticize.
And it's not even loaded.
People use religion as a front. They use marriage as a front. Anything that's respectable and that people are apt to let them get away with something.
Well, I'm not respectable.
They'll use it.
I'm not respectable.
So
you've told me that many times. I'm just not respectable. But you hang out with me. Doesn't that give you a clue right there?
Yes. yes, this is sort of people that I hang out with because, well, anyone who believes
Sounds like a
that
double standard to
any
me.
institution, marriage, religion is perfect, that there's nothing to criticize about it. I can't really hang out with them because they can't see the weakness of any kind of system, any kind of custom, whatever you do. People can find ways to use it in a bad way or irresponsible way. And my dad, he had used marriage as
Well, being irresponsible and being
irresponsible.
bad, whatever that means, they're not the
Yeah.
same thing. All right.
I mean, my dad was not an honest man. He never admitted to being a bisexual, and I couldn't even talk to him about it because he would just scream and holler and act like a complete insane man.
Didn't you tell me?
So I just
one time-
had to let that
Didn't
go.
you tell me one time that when he and your mother got into a fight, it took 3 days before the fight was over?
Oh, many times, but
3 days?
yes. So, but anyone who's a bisexual and continues on with their affairs is a very dishonest person. And I know, even though I know it's very difficult to have those kind of feelings, what are you going to do with them? My dad wanted respectability, so he did like a lot of other guys did. They had their bisexual affairs or homosexual partners, and they got married. And they counted on the women not being too ignorant, too unsure of themselves to accuse them or see what they were doing. My dad was a very ferocious man. He was very intimidating when he got angry. My mother had a very hot temper. She was very intimidating too. So you could imagine when those two got in a fight. But he could intimidate you if he really wanted to. And it was absolutely not worth your life, risking your life to accuse him of being a bisexual or having affairs with men. Because I would come up to it, I'd approach it many times, but just could not could not feel that it was safe. It was safe to to accuse him of it, because he wasn't ready to hear that. He wasn't ready to be accused. And I just felt that there would be a scene that wouldn't be worth it, that it just wouldn't be good for the family, so I would back off. But I was always trying to get his temper cooled off to the point that maybe he could, my mother, she finally got a boyfriend who didn't drink and didn't have the terrible temper that my dad had, that had
The question I've always
admitted
wondered.
that he was a bisexual.
Right, well, I think we've gone through this before. The only thing that bothers me about it is knowing what you've told me about your mother. How in the world could a guy that didn't drink get involved with your mother?
Well,
I mean,
mother
seriously,
didn't drink.
Why do you think your father was drinking all the time after he got involved with your mother? Oh my God.
Well, he, as far as I was concerned, he was drinking because he had the problem.
Okay, let's go to the guy. Let's go to the guy that didn't drink but was a confessed bisexual.
Yeah. Well, he just didn't have.
See, those
to be
two
a
things don't
drinker.
go together. The bisexuals I've known always drank.
I know. Well, he was a Jewish guy, and
Well, that makes a big difference.
well, they don't tend to drink.
Oh, yeah, right.
I don't think they are as
I've never
prone
known a
to
Jewish
drink
guy
as
that
say the
didn't drink
Irish, the Scotch.
If you ever tried
That
Morgan David, that's
ancestor
terrible
is,
stuff.
But Saul
Would you wanna
had
drink Morgan
never been a drinker. He was an eater. He was.
Here we are, folks, the drinker and the eater, right?
Yeah. And so,
She don't drink.
but he was
I
an
don't
example of how civilized eventually you could become. But Saul was a child molester too, so.
Oh, well, that forgives everything right there,
Oh,
yes.
so
I would
he
hate to
had
go with a guy that-
multiple problems. In fact,
With a guy that.
he had a career as a singer, but it got ruined by rumors of the child molesting. So.
Is that record? I mean, that tape you
Yeah.
brought over?
Yeah, and he would sing
And your
with
mother,
the.
what, ponied up $20,000
Yes,
or
his
something
specialty
like
was
that?
to have a background music of symphony orchestra.
So what did
No
she do?
less.
Rent out
I don't
symphony
know
orchestra?
what he did, but he borrowed $20,000 from my mother. She convinced her to put into it. But see, here he was.
And
he
you
was
folks think your
taking
family's
advantage.
messed up? I don't know.
Saul was taking advantage of her. He was going to marry her if that's what it took, and he was going to lie to her about everything. And so and me being the bisexual police,
Yeah.
I had to get her informed that he was a bisexual, and
See,
not
this
only
thing right here
that,
goes,
he was a child molester.
Beep, beep, beep.
Mother, he is a child molester. For
Beep,
heaven's
beep.
sake, don't marry a child molester. And in fact, his best friend
You got
that
a
he made
problem
up
with
in
child
Utah
molesters, don't you?
got arrested for child molesting
Oh, geez.
and went
Let's hear
to
all
prison
about it.
for a long time. But when Saul heard about this, why he stayed in Arizona and never did go back up there because he could have got arrested too. Although I don't know if he was
Well,
in on it.
I'll tell you
because-
one thing that I learned when I was on the street, and you meet these, well, they're not fugitives, guys that have been in and out of jail. But the worst thing you can go in for is
Child molesting.
because they will molest the out of you, and not only that, there's a good chance you will never see the light of day again. I mean,
Oh,
even the world's
yeah.
worst murderers, they don't
But-
like child molesters.
But if
Come here, son.
families
I wanna
didn't
have a
have-
talk with you.
if families didn't have people like me in them to be the police,
I didn't know a family like you anything. You'd scare
Saul
the crap out of me.
would have probably married my mother, took her for all her bank account. At the point when she met him, she had $300,000. Well, that was a mighty nice sum that he was busy, and he had her buying a new car, and he didn't like that, so they bought another one, and just stuff like that, extracting her money from her. But if I hadn't jumped in there and said, "You don't want to marry him, mother. He's a child molester and he's a bisexual," and that was when my mother finally remembered something after she had finally
We know that
accepted
story, right?
and remembered something about my dad. Until then, it didn't even dawn on her. 35 years with the man, and it never dawned on her, and I didn't dare tell her. I didn't dare tell her, "Mother,
How come I-
Daddy is a bisexual. Can you understand
can I-
that?" No, I didn't dare say that to her because they were married. Married.
What?
He
Why
was
can't
under
I
the
find women
protection
like that
of
with-
marriage.
with money and are extremely?
Yes, but there was a very
Well-
good chance that he would have, they would have gotten to fight, and one of them would have ended up dead.
How
So
do
this
you
is
know?
why. Well, that's why I didn't tell her. Well, good heavens! If he's going to hold a gun on her and threaten to kill her, don't you think that suggests that there could be homicide somewhere?
Well, you've told me on
Possibly.
several occasions you were going to kill me, but that didn't
Oh.
bother me.
You haven't seen anything like what that went on there. Good Lord, they'd go at each other with the
Now, who are we
whatever
talking about
weapon
now?
they could find.
Who are we talking about now?
Throwing things.
Wait a
and
minute, who are we talking about now?
my mother and dad. I
All
remember
right,
one
you
time
keep
they were
bouncing
throwing
back and forth. I don't know what the hell you're
big
talking about.
file this long, iron or steel, whatever it was. It was this long, and they were throwing it. And I thought, oh my God, they're gonna throw it at each other, and if that hits one of them in the head, it'll be the end. No, just so I couldn't. You have to be careful that you don't cause a death when you're trying to be the police. So.